Imagine trying to rob two banks at the same time, right across the street from each other. Sounds like a cartoon, doesn't it? But a real gang of outlaws actually tried it. And trust me, it did not go well. This is the story of the dumbest, most unbelievable heist you've ever heard. Grab a snack and get ready because it only gets crazier from here. A long, long time ago, back on October 5th, 1892, there was a small town in Kansas called Coffeyville. Only about 2,000 people lived there, and they were a loud, rowdy bunch. It was the classic Wild West, dusty streets, wooden buildings, and people carrying guns like they were part of their everyday clothes. And nothing says Wild West like a good old bank robbery. Right in the middle of the day, the famous Dalton brothers were getting ready to make their move. Their first plan was simple. Step 1, walk to the bank. Step 2, grab the money. That's as foolproof as a plan can get, right? But the oldest brother, whose nickname was Pop, said, "No way, that's too boring. We need to be famous. We need to do something even bigger than Jesse James ever did. So why rob one bank when you can rob two?" One of the other brothers looked at him like he was crazy and said, There's only 5 of us." Pop didn't care. He said, "If something goes wrong, just yell across the street and we'll come help." And just like that, they were off. This was, without a doubt, the dumbest heist in history. Before we jump headfirst into this total circus of a robbery, let's learn a little about these wannabe famous outlaws. The Dalton brothers, Bob, Grat, Empt, and their 2 friends, Dick and Bill, actually started out as good guys. Believe it or not, they were deputies who chased outlaws for a living. Their older brother Frank was a respected deputy marshal too. He was a real hero. But then Frank got shot and killed by some men who were running illegal whiskey. After that, the younger Daltons looked at being on the right side of the law and said, "No thanks, we're done with that." They switched sides completely. Plus, chasing bandits paid almost nothing. They could barely afford food, but being a bandit, that's where the real money was. So they started robbing trains, stealing from people, and causing trouble all across the American Midwest. Soon they became famous enough to see their own faces on wanted posters. They started believing their own hype. And that's exactly what led them to this incredibly stupid, way too ambitious idea. Now let's jump back to the day of the heist. The Dalton brothers were ready to become criminal legends. Here was Bob's so-called foolproof plan. Bob and Empt Dalton would walk into the First National Bank and rob it. Meanwhile, Grat Dalton, Bill Powers, and Dick Broad would stroll into the Camden Bank, which was literally right across the street. That's right, 2 banks, 1 street, 5 outlaws. Now, if your big plan to get rich involves robbing 2 banks in the town where you grew up, you might want to think again. But the Daltons didn't think. They just acted. And that was their first mistake. By the way, if you're buried in debt, credit card bills, medical bills, student loans, it can feel like the system is against you. But there's a smarter way than robbing banks. A company called PDS Debt has already helped over 100,000 people get out of debt. They have a great reputation and will make a custom plan just for your life. If debt has you trapped like a snake in a knot, go to PDS Debt.com for a free assessment. Way safer than what the Daltons did. Back to the story. In the morning, the brothers put on fake beards and mustaches that looked ridiculous. They didn't fool anyone, not a single person. They tied up their horses in a nearby alley and walked toward the 2 banks with their guns drawn. Remember, this was broad daylight. The sun was shining. People were out shopping and walking around. And here came 5 guys who looked like Gandalf on a bad day, carrying Winchesters and revolvers. Yeah, everyone got suspicious real fast. Also, the Daltons grew up in this town. Everyone knew their faces. People started shouting things like, "Nice beard, Bob." And then, "Wait a minute, that's Bob Dalton and Empt. Oh no, they're robbing the banks." Their cover was blown before the heist even started. Word spread like wildfire, and in the Wild West, there were no insurance policies. If your gold or money got stolen from the bank, it was really gone. You'd never see it again. So the townspeople felt like the Daltons were robbing them personally. They weren't just stealing from some big corporation. They were stealing from their neighbors. People got mad, really mad. They rushed toward the banks to see if the rumors were true. And guess what? Right next to the banks was a hardware store, and that hardware store was packed with guns and bullets. So stable owners, shopkeepers, even the local blacksmith, everyone ran into that store and grabbed rifles, pistols, and shotguns. Within minutes, an angry, heavily armed mob was waiting outside both banks. The Daltons had no idea what was coming. Inside the Camden Bank, Grat, Dick, and Bill ran to the vault. By sheer luck, the vault door was already open, but the gold wasn't just sitting there. It was inside a second safe, and the bank manager lied to them. He said, "That safe has a 10-minute timer. You'll have to wait." The Daltons actually believed him. Seriously, none of them thought to just try opening it. None of them thought, hey, maybe this guy is lying to save his own skin. and none of them noticed how quiet the streets had gotten. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. But they waited anyway, because they really, really wanted that gold. On the other side of the street, Bob and Empt had much better luck. They burst into the First National Bank, tied up the officers and customers, and forced the employees to open the vault. No lying bankers, no timers. Just open the door and grab the goods. They stuffed bags full of gold and cash until the bags were bursting. Then they grabbed a bank worker to use as a human shield and slowly walked out the front door. Their brilliant plan was to cross the street, meet up with Grat and the others, and then all run back to the horses together. But before they could even leave the bank's front steps, a banker who had been hiding outside popped up from behind a wagon and started shooting at them. Bullets flew past their heads. Bob said, "Big brother, I don't think going this way is smart. Maybe we should go out the back." Empt agreed. So they dragged their human shield back inside and headed for the rear door. Back at the Kundin Bank, the trio heard the gunshots from across the street. They rushed out of the vault to see what was happening. That's when bullets started flying through their own doors and windows. The angry mob had started shooting at them too. So there they were, trapped inside a bank, getting shot at from all directions. And even then, one of them still said, "I know we're getting shot at and our window to escape is getting smaller, but I really, really like gold." They were not the smartest outlaws in the West. Bob and Empt kicked open the back door of the National Bank and escaped into the alley, still using that poor bank worker as a shield. A brave young man jumped out from behind a corner with his gun drawn and told them to surrender. Bob just laughed and said, "No, you surrender, or we'll shoot." The young man started to give a heroic speech about righteousness and God, but Bob and Empt didn't have time for that. They just ran off. They made it to the end of the alley and peeked around the corner. What they saw made their blood run cold. A huge crowd of townspeople was unloading their guns into the Kundin Bank. Bullets were tearing through the windows, the doors, the walls. They also spotted an old man holding a Winchester rifle, aiming it right at the front door of the National Bank. He was clearly waiting for them to come back out that way. But Bob noticed something the old man didn't. The building had another door. So Bob snuck around and shot the old man. Then he shot another person, 2 more dead. An officer who had been left outside on the sidewalk saw this happen. He ran to the hardware store, grabbed a rifle, and found the sneakiest hiding spot you've ever seen. He waited for Bob and Empt to cross the street. But somehow, I don't know how Bob kept doing this. Bob saw the reflection of the officer's gun barrel from 200 feet away. He raised his own gun and shot the officer right in the head. Then he and Empt dashed across the street, hidden by all the gunfire still blasting into the Kundin Bank. Inside that bank, the trio of Grat, Dick, and Bill were in big trouble. They shot back every now and then to keep the crowd from storming in. But there wasn't much else they could do. Worse, Bill got shot in the arm. Blood was pouring out. He was turning pale. Grat finally said, "Forget the gold. If we stay here one more minute, we'll be dead before that safe opens. Just stuff your pockets with cash and get ready to run." So they grabbed whatever they could and got ready. Then, on a silent signal, all 3 jumped out from behind their cover, firing their guns wildly. The crowd was so surprised that they ducked for cover. That gave the trio just enough time to run out the side door and dash toward the horses. They were so close, just a little farther, they thought, but the townspeople weren't giving up. They chased the outlaws to the end of the alley. Bob was the first to get hit. A bullet smashed into his head and another pierced his heart. He dropped dead right there in the dirt. Bill, with one arm useless and bleeding, tried to climb onto his horse, but he got shot down too. Empt and Dick managed to slide onto their horses and race away. But then Empt looked back. He saw his big brother Bob lying on the ground. Without thinking, he turned his horse around and tried to pull Bob onto the back of his saddle. That's when a buckshot round slammed into Empt's back. He fell off his horse and landed in the dirt next to Bob. Dick kept riding as fast as he could, but a couple of bullets caught him in the upper back. He was found dead 2 miles west of town, still slouched over his horse. A couple miles farther west, another Dalton brother named Bill was waiting with extra horses to help the gang escape. He waited and waited, but nobody came. Finally, he got tired and went home. Later, he learned what had happened to his brothers. Every single gang member was killed except one. The only survivor was Empt Dalton, and he had 23 gunshot wounds. Can you believe that? 23 bullets, and he still didn't die. Some people said it was a miracle. Others said he was just too stubborn to give up. He was nursed back to health by doctors who couldn't believe their eyes. Then he was sent to prison for the rest of his young life. But 14 years later, he was pardoned. He walked out of prison a free man. And what did he do with his freedom? He became an actor. And guess what kind of roles he played? Bandits. On stage, he pretended to rob banks and trains. Once a bandit, always a bandit, right? And that's how the famous Dalton gang met their end in Coffeyville, Kansas. All because of a terribly planned, way too ambitious double heist that never had a prayer of working. Later in life, someone asked Empt why they tried such a ridiculous stunt. He said that while his older brother Pop wanted fame, the real reason was fear. There was a deputy marshal named Heck Thomas who had been hunting them for a long time. He was good, really good. They were so scared of him that they felt forced to pull off one big, huge job. They needed enough money to leave the territory forever, and they were right to be scared. The last Dalton criminal, Bill, was hunted down by Heck Thomas and shot dead in a shootout. So one question still hangs in the air. What must their poor mother have been thinking at home? She raised 5 sons, and most of them ended up dead or in prison over a bank robbery that was doomed from the start. Those crazy, foolish kids.